Sounds of spoken English do not match up a lot of time with letters of written English. If we cannot use the letter of the alphabet in a consistent way to represent the sounds we make, how do we describe the sounds of a language like English? One solution is to use phonetic symbols. We will look at how these symbols are used to represent both consonant and vowel sounds of English words, and what physical aspects of the human vocal tract are involved in this production of sounds. In articulatory phonetics, we investigate how speech sounds are produced using the very complex oral equipment we have. We start with the air pushed out by the lungs through the trachea to the larynx. Inside the larynx are your vocal cords, which take two basic positions. First, when the vocal cords are spread apart, the air from the lungs passes between them unimpeded. Sounds produced in this way described as voiceless. Second, when the vocal cords are drawn together, the air from the lungs repeatedly pushes them apart as it passes through, creating a vibration. Sound produced in this way are described as voiced. The distinction can be felt physically if you place a fingertip gently on top of your Adam's apple. Then produce sound such as z, z, z or f, f, f. Because these are voiced sounds, you should be able to feel some vibration. Now, make sounds s, s, s or f, f, f. Because these are voiceless sound, there should be no vibration. Once the air has passed through the larynx, it comes out through the mouth and or the nose. Most consonant sounds are produced by using the tongue and other parts of the mouth to constrict in some way the shape of oral cavity through which the air is passing. The terms used to describe many sounds are those which denote the place of articulation of the sound, that is, the location inside the mouth at which the constriction takes place. Bilabial sounds form using both upper and lower lips. At the initial sounds in the words pat, bat, and mat are all bilabials. P is voiceless, while B and M are voiced. We can also describe W sound found at the beginning of way, walk, and whirl as a bilabial. Labiodental sound form with the upper teeth and lower lip. The initial sound of the word fat and the final sounds in the word safe and safe are labiodentals. These words represent the phonetic F, which is voiceless, and phi, which is voiced. Notice that the final sound in the word cuff and initial sound in photo, despite the spelling difference, are both pronounced as F. Dental sounds are formed with the tongue tip behind the upper front teeth. The initial sound of thin and the final sound of bath are both voiceless dentals. The symbol used for this sound is theta. It's the symbol you would use for the first and last sounds in the phrase three teeth. The voiced dental is represented by the symbol F. This sound found in the pronunciation of initial sound of common words like the, there, then, and thus. It is also the middle consonant word in feather and the final sound of bath. The term interdentals is sometimes used for those consonants when they are pronounced with the tongue tip between the upper and lower teeth. Alveolar sounds form with the front part of the tongue on the alveolar ridge, which is the tough, bony ridge immediately behind above the upper teeth or the roof of the mouth. The initial sounds in top, dip, sit, and zoo are all alveolars. The symbols for these sounds are easy to remember. T, D, S, Z, and N. Of these, C and S are voiceless, whereas D and Z and N are voiced. It may be clear that the final sound of the word bus and buzz have to be S and Z respectively. But what about the final sound of the word race? The spelling is misleading because the final sound in the word is voiced and so must be represented by Z. Notice also that despite the different spelling of not and not, both of these words are pronounced with N as the initial sound. Other alveolars are the L sound found at the beginning of words such as lap and lit, and the R sound at the beginning of right and right. If you feel back behind the alveolar ridge, you should find a hard part in the roof of your mouth. This is called the hard palate or just the palate. Sound produced with the tongue and the palate are called palatals. Examples of palatals are the initial sounds in the word shout and child, which both voiceless, sh, and the ch. The word brush begin with voiceless palatal sounds, sh, and the word church begins and ends with the other voiceless palatal sounds, ch. One of the voiced palatals, represented by the symbol ch, is not very common in English, but can be found as the middle consonant sounds in words like treasure and pleasure, or the final sound in rogue. The other voiced palatal is j, which is the initial sounds in words like joke and gem. The word judge and the name George both begin and end with the sound ch. Despite the obvious differences in spelling, one other voiced palatal is Y sound used at the beginning of words like you and yet. Even further back in the roof of the mouth, beyond the hard palate, you will find a soft area which is called the soft palate or the velum. Sounds produced with the back of the tongue against the velum are called velars. This is a voiceless velar sound represented by the symbol K, which occurs not only in kid and kill, but is also the initial sound in car and cold. Despite the variety in spelling, this K sound is both the initial and the final sound in words cook, kick, and coke. The voiced velar sound, heard at the beginning of words like go, gun, and give, is represented by G. This is also the final sounds in words like bag, mug, and despite the spelling, plague. The velum can be lowered to allow air to flow through the nasal cavity and thereby produce another voiced velar, represented by the word typically referred as angma. In written English, this sound is normally spelled as the two letters N and G. So the sound is at the end of sing, sang, and despite the spelling, tongue. It occurs twice in the form ringing. Be careful not to mislead by the spelling word like bang. It ends with the ang sound only. There is no G sound in this word. There is one sound that is produced without the active use of tongue and the other parts of the mouth. That is the sound H. Ha, ha. which occurs at the beginning of have and house, and most speakers as the first sound in who and whose. This sound is usually described as a voiceless glottal. The glottis is the space between the vocal folds in the larynx. When the glottis is open, as in the production of other voiceless sound, there is no manipulation of the air passing out the mouth, and the sound produced is that represented by So far, we have concentrated on describing consonant sound in terms where they are articulated. We can also describe the same sound in terms of how they are articulated, such as a description is necessary if we want to be able to differentiate between some sound which, in preceding discussion, we have placed the same category. For the example, we can say that T and S are both voiceless alveolar sound. How do they differ? They differ in their manner of articulation, that is, in the way they are pronounced. The T sound is the set of sounds called stop, and the S sound is one of set called fricatives. Of the sound we have already mentioned, the set P, B, T, D, K, G are all produced by some form of stopping the air stream, then letting it go abruptly. This type of consonant sound resulting from of a blocking or stopping effect on the airstream is called stop. A full description of the T sound at the beginning of the word, like tennis, is a voiceless alveolar stop. In some discussion, only the manner of articulation is mentioned, as when it said the word bed, for example, begins and ends with the voice stop. The manner of articulation in producing these sounds F, V, Th, and F, and S and Z, and T and Sh involves almost blocking the airstream, having the air push through the very narrow opening. As the air is pushed through, a type of friction is produced and the resulting sounds are called fricatives. If you put your open hands in front of your mouth when making these sounds, F and S in particular, you should be able to feel the airstream being pushed out. The usual pronunciation of the word fish begins and ends with the voiceless fricatives, F and Sh. The word thus begins and ends with the voiced fricatives, Th and S. The sound A, as in hi or hello, is voiceless and also usually included in the set of fricatives. If you combine a brief stopping of air with an abrupt release, which causes some friction, you should be able to produce the sound Th and J. These are called affricatives and occur at the beginning of words cheap and jeep. In the first of these, there are voiceless affricate, T, and the second are voiced affricative, J. In addition to single vowel sounds, we regularly create sounds that consist of combination of two vowel sounds known as diphthongs. When we produce I, O, A, E, diphthongs, our vocal organs move from one vocalic position A to another I as we produce the sound I, as in hi or bye. The movement in diphthongs is from low towards high front. Alternatively, we can use movement from low towards high back, combining A and U to produce the sound O, which is the diphthong repeated in the traditional speech training exercise. How now, brown cow? In some descriptions, the movement is interpreted as involving a glide, such as G, or W. So the diphthongs we are representing as I and O may sometimes be seen as I or ow. While the vowels E, A, and O are used as single sound in other language and in some of other varieties of English, they are only typically used as the first sounds of diphthong in American English.